So I'm June Whiteford, farm here at Lower Mill of Tynet farm on the Crown Estate, Fockerbers Estate, right in the heart of Morrisshire. So initially I was brought up on a dairy farm. My father came out of the farm when I was about 10, so I never got any succession. I was too stubborn to go and do anything else. I wanted to be a farmer, so went down a sort of management route for a year or two, but really just wanted to be in charge of my own destiny and just kind of work for myself. So we started, we looked at poultry. Had no poultry experience at that time, but there's a market for organic eggs. So in 2005 I approached someone to rent me a small bit of ground, and we put a hen shed on and started up the poultry. There's been a few challenges over the years. You know, we come through a recession, organic egg sales dropping, and sort of seeing the same again. But in 2012 we got the opportunity to take on tenancy at Lower Mill of Tynet farm. So that's 10 years we've been there, and about 3 years ago we got the neighbouring farm added on. So Tynet's about 50 hectares and the neighbouring farm's about 100 hectares, so it takes us up to about 150 hectares, so it's quite a nice sized unit. And we've extended the hens, so we've basically moved all the poultry over from the existing site. So we've got 12,000 laying hens. A couple of years ago we added on a micro dairy, so we're milking something in the region of 15 to 20 cows, which we'll hopefully build on. And most of the milk all gets retailed through our farm shop. We've got a vending machine which is open 24/7. We'll sell our eggs, milk, some other produce. We also sell some of our own beef and lamb through the shop. So that's now accounts for probably about a third of our turnover through the shop. And obviously that's retail price. It makes a world of difference to making the farm pay. Because obviously there's been a big investment, especially in the poultry side of things and the dairy, to get to where we are. Without any sort of financial backing behind us in the first place. Banks have been tricky, to say the least, over the years. So it's pretty much a case of ploughing the profits back into what you're doing and just trying to be more efficient and build something up for the next generation, hopefully. Fell into organic by accident. The farm I worked on when I left the school, Milton of Connage, they weren't organic at that time, but a couple of years later, after I went to college, they converted to organic. And some of the neighbouring farms around about them, you know, the organic carrots was quite a big thing, organic potatoes. So it was quite, you know, my eyes was kind of open to organic quite early on, before maybe other parts of the country started looking at it. Starting off in your own, you kind of do what everybody else is doing. So you have to kind of think out the box a little bit. Organic offers a premium, and it generally means it's generally less intensive, so it's generally a lower capital investment to get into it. And if you're getting a premium, okay, it might be a bit more work involved, but the figures stack up. Whereas, you know, I'm not saying it's the only route into farming, but it's certainly a sort of viable route for, you know, a young farmer wanting to start up on his own. Initially when we started at hens, we started with 3,000 birds. That sort of doubled up to 6,000, and then, you know, we've sort of moved all that over to Lower Mill of Tynet, and we're now up to 12,000 birds. So that's 4 flocks of 3,000 birds. Initially all that eggs would have went wholesale to a packer, and that packer would have packed for various supermarkets. We still do an element of that, so roughly half our eggs will go wholesale, and they get packed for supermarkets, which is, you know, it's a relatively low margin in that, but it's a lorry coming in and taking, you know, 2-3 pallets away at a time, a couple of times a week, and it's a, you know, a weekly check comes in, you know, for that eggs. But the other half of the eggs we've built up over the years, basically our own customers, and that can range from a bed and breakfast to a hotel to a cafe to a bakery, and various shops, and of course our own shop at the farm. So we're getting in and we're, you know, there's anything up to retail price for that eggs, and it's, you know, a bit more profit in it, but there's a lot more work in it. You know, we have to grade the eggs, and, you know, that, you know, about 5 years ago we got a food processing marketing grant to put a new egg packing shed up and install a, you know, fairly state-of-the-art egg grader, which was efficient, which take the eggs straight out the shed, pack the eggs, you know, without having to double handle them, and you know, trying to get efficiency into a small enterprise, you know, it's big capital investment, but it pays for itself, you know. In 2015, I was awarded a Nuffield scholarship, and I travelled to parts of Europe, to South Africa, Kenya, America, and I found that the most of the eggs in the world are white, and white eggs generally come from white hens. And that was the case up until about the 60s in this country. And from what I can understand, white eggs were associated with cages, and because the UK was quite advanced with cages at the time, people stopped buying white eggs. Brown eggs, you know, come from brown hens, are maybe slightly less efficient than brown eggs, maybe always been a bit dearer, so sort of almost British mentality, if it's dearer, more expensive, it must be better, which is not necessarily the case. So just speaking to farmers about white eggs and how much better the hens were to look after, I just thought I have to try this for myself. Pretty much everybody I spoke to in the industry said, you're daft, people do not want to buy white eggs. So when somebody kind of tells you you can't, you kind of stick your heels in a little bit. So we tried it, we spoke to some of our customers, especially a bakery that takes a lot of eggs off us, and says, are you bothered about shell colour? And they're like, no, it goes in the bin. So I thought, well, we want to try these white hens. So we're just blown over by the results we get out of that hens. We used to, with organic, with brown hens, we used to keep them anywhere between 72 and 80 weeks, and you're hoping to go over 300 eggs per hen, you know, 300, 350, thereabouts. The white hens were getting over 400 eggs. Now, conventional farmers aren't even talking about 400 eggs per hen. You know, we're just, and it's purely because the mortality is so low in that hens that every single hen in that shed is laying an egg, and you're averaging over 6 eggs per week, right through the whole lay. And the egg quality, we can keep the birds, we've kept them up to 90 weeks of age. The oldest we've ever kept brown birds is about 84, and you're really struggling for shell quality and for mortality in the hens to keep hens viable any longer than that, especially with the cost of feed. So white hens, to keep them to 90 weeks and get that much more eggs out of them, they're more efficient. You get a smaller egg for longer to start, but the shell quality is actually better. And even for people baking, the yolk colour, the yolk size, sorry, is fractionally bigger. But when you boil a fresh brown egg, you can't actually peel it. But if you boil a fresh white egg, you can peel it. So, you know, we're finding, you know, hotels and everybody's using our eggs, chefs and all that, they're actually seeing the eggs actually better quality. But we also wanted to sell them to consumers, so we've put them in packs, and to start with we tried to explain white eggs from white hens, and we quickly realised that when people seen you and walk down the street and going into a customer with eggs, they saw you carrying eggs, they didn't see you carrying white eggs. No one would ever comment that the eggs are white unless you'd point it out to them, which I thought was fascinating. So we took that branding off the egg box, and what we found is that if we just put white eggs into a store, we actually start to sell more eggs than if you give them the option of white and brown. People are creatures of habit, so if you buy brown eggs, you probably always tend to go and pick up the brown eggs off the shelf. If there's no brown eggs there, you'll just pick up the white eggs because you wanted eggs, and then you realise that the eggs are better, so then you go back and buy the white ones, or you tell people and they go buy and buy the white eggs. And we've saw egg sales double, sometimes treble, in stores that we supply, just because we've changed from brown to white. From our point of view, you know, it's just to not have any mortality in that birds, it's just a joy to look after them. They're just, you know, even at the end of lay, when you're like, you know, you want to see the back of these hens, you know, you're almost sad for them to go off in a lorry and go, because they're just, you know, and I think they're a lot more elegant. They've got long white tails. To me, they look a bit more feminine than what a brown bird looks. They're slightly smaller, so they are better feed converters, which is why predominantly the world uses white hens. And you know, in actual fact, all hens lay white eggs. It's just a brown hen puts a pigment outside in the last 24 hours. So, you know, you don't eat that, that part of the egg. Being organic does add, although it creates a premium for your product, you do need that premium because the costs are always generally higher. An egg point of view, the number of hens that we can put into a shed and the stocking density are different to free range. So that makes us less efficient. It means there's more labour involved in collecting that eggs and handling the eggs. But also from a feed point of view, organic feed, you know, we saw a lot of challenges in the last 12 months with the problems in Ukraine. A lot of organic grain used to actually come from Ukraine, which although we don't directly buy any, it does affect the feed prices on a national level, and that's what we're working to. We're seeing feed costs rise probably 40 to 50%, but it's also increasing the cost of the pullets that we buy. So, you know, it's a huge cost to try and pass that on to the consumer. We're also seeing fuel, electricity, all these overheads which you never paid too much attention to before are all skyrocketing. So our whole farm policy really here is we try to be as self-sufficient as we possibly can. So we've got cattle and sheep. They only get fed what's grown in the farm, predominantly grass. Maybe a little bit of homegrown cereals, but that's it. Last year I think we grew something like maybe 30% of our requirements for cereals for the hens. The rest of it we all managed to buy from local organic farmers. The furthest away would be maybe 40, 50 miles. So we need about approximately 300 tonnes, maybe organic cereals to feed our hens for the year. It's this whole nutrient cycle, the whole closed loop. So all the manure and the muck that comes from the hens and the cattle, that's all getting fed back onto the land. That's growing the fertility, producing fertility to grow the next crop. Whether that's to feed the hens or feed the cows again, and we've also got a rotation of grass. So we're not just monocropping barley year after year after year. You know, that ground's getting a break, it's going into grass, it's getting less tillage because it's going into maybe 3-4 years grass before it gets tilled back out. And that has all, you know, helps biodiversity, helps the wildlife, you know. We're organics, we're not putting any chemicals or artificial fertiliser on. The more resilient we can make ourselves, you know, the better. You know, farmers get stuck between, we get dictated to what price we get for our produce, and then get dictated to what we pay to our suppliers. So if we can eliminate as much suppliers as possible and maximise what price we get in terms of taking to wholesale and retail at the other end. The crops that we grow here, we tend to what I call intercropping or companion cropping. So rather than just grow a field of barley, we'll grow barley, peas and oats in the same field, or wheat and peas in the same field. Peas is, you know, a good protein source, and it's a more natural way to grow crops. So, you know, they benefit each other. So rather than tons per acre, you know, if you look at the protein we're growing per acre, it starts to, you know, look a lot better. So the cows are only they get a little bit of homegrown cereals, but predominantly the protein they're getting is, you know, grass and silage. And only, you know, that cost is the same from year to year, really. Okay, the cost of silage, you know, contractors, diesel, plastic, it's going up. But, you know, having ruminants is a good part of the mix. It's the poultry, the cereal prices. It's, you know, we do rely on, you know, you're feeding a hen. It's, you know, it's a hybrid bird. It requires a real specialist diet, and, you know, we do rely heavily on soya. You know, it's organic soya, but it's still soya. It's still imported, and we're trying to reduce that. And so by growing our wheat and peas, we're growing our own protein ourselves. We've actually managed to reduce soya from 20% to 10%. And long term, we'd like to hopefully totally eliminate that. The more local we can feed our hens, the better. So growing things like barley and peas, or barley, peas and oats, or wheat and peas, we sow it mixed and we harvest it mixed. And there's very little operations in between. We find that we get a higher yield than if we just grew the cereal crop on their own. You know, we also find that the protein's higher in the wheat because the peas is actually feeding all the time rather than just this dump of nitrogen put on when you go on with fertiliser. So we've never really had any issues harvesting. We've moved away from just barley peas because they tend to sort of brackle over, but the barley still holds the peas off the ground, so it's actually still quite easy to combine. It just looks a bit of a mess. So we find with the barley peas and the oats and the wheat and peas, generally you don't really see that it's an intercrop. It just looks like a field of wheat or a field of, you know. And even when you're walking through it, you're hard pushed to see the peas. It's not until you actually look in the combine, you're looking at what's going into the trailer, you actually see there's quite a lot of peas in that. It's just not so noticeable when you're walking through it. The biggest challenge we find farming organically, you know, we've got more than one enterprise running on the farm. You know, we've got the cows, the sheep, the poultry. You know, we've got the shop, the diversification. You know, and managing that, and then managing that with staff, and that's just a whole different ball game altogether. You almost have to be a people person. Still learning that skills. So if you've got good staff, you know, we've got a good team just now. We're taking in a Ukrainian family, and he's from a farm back home. He's got poultry experience, and he's made a world of difference. And we've got a good chap in the eggs as well. So, you know, we've got a good team. It's not cheap employing staff, and organically, and sometimes you feel you're a wee bit inefficient. You know, sometimes it's just, you know, farming's kind of went, do one thing and get big at it. And you know, we're investing, you know, quite a bit of capital to try and make things as efficient as possible. You know, get a robot for the milking and try and just make the daily routine as simple as possible. So if some days off, then, you know, the day can carry on without, you know, we've got a small team, and you rely heavily on that team to make it work. Other challenges, if we're not failing at something, we're not really trying hard enough. So we kind of experiment. There's quite a few experiments in the go normally at any one time, and we've played about with, you know, direct drilling. You know, and we always learn. You know, sometimes we do things we think this isn't going to work, but we learn from it to maybe turn it around to so it can work. You know, we're trying to reduce the tillage just to improve soil health. You know, we've done a lot of things to improve the soil health, as in we've got plenty of diversity, species, and, you know, what we're growing. Red clovers, plantain, there's chicory in there. You know, there's no tillage at all in here until we decide to plough it up and put a crop in, and then you've got a nice clean base for getting a couple of years cereal crops, which will help feed the hens, and then you just get into this rotation. You know, we're not putting on chemicals or artificial fertiliser, which is, you know, which is harming the biology in your soil. So you're sort of trying to work with nature as much as possible. You get the odd weed pressure, nothing I wouldn't say too difficult. I think the more we're organic, the less weed issues we seem to see. I think weeds are normally an indication of what you're doing wrong. So if you can just read what that's trying to tell you and adapt your management accordingly, then I think for MD starting out in industry, I think organic's a good way to go. You can start smaller and build it up. You can get a premium. You can sell direct to consumer if you want. If you've got any advice, you kind of have to follow your heart a little bit. Do the sums. You know, a lot of people tell you, well, that'll never work, and I tend to not listen. Sometimes I maybe should have, but I tend to try and learn from your own mistakes. I think that's the best way for MD to learn, is learn from your own mistakes and just don't get too deep that you kind of get out of it. You're not going to make a huge amount of money, but, you know, by trying to make yourself, adding diversity and making yourself resilient, for us, just, I think that's a good way to go. Spread the risk, you know, don't put all your eggs in one basket, so to speak.